Hello, my name is Mary. You may have heard of me. Better yet, you may have heard of my son, Jesus. Oh, how I wish I had time to tell you the whole story, from when the angel appeared and told me that I was going to give birth to a son, to the conversation that I had with Joseph, to the looks that I got from strangers. I would tell you about the ride to Bethlehem at 9 months pregnant and giving birth in a stable. That was not glamorous, but it sure was glorious. There are so many great moments when he was a child that I would love to tell you about, but for tonight, we're going to fast forward 30 years to when he began his ministry. It was fascinating watching him heal blind eyes and open deaf ears. He was raising the dead. He was healing people. I mean, he was nothing short of amazing, which is why I didn't understand what was happening on that disturbing day. Judas had betrayed him, and they took him to Pilate. And by the time I arrived, Jesus was there in the court, stripped of clothing, and they were beating him with a cat of 9 tails. And when they whipped him, the claws on the end would come around and just rip the flesh right off of his body. And I said, "Why are you doing this?" But the crowd was crying out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And I said, "Why? What has he done? He's only done good." But they continued. I mean, the beating was bad enough, but they just kept mocking him, spitting on him. And there he was. The sweat of his brow was mixed with his blood because someone thought it was funny to shove a crown of thorns down into his head. I mean, those were not little rosebush thorns. Those were huge thorns shoved into his head. And on top of those wounds, they placed a heavy, splintery cross and made him carry it. He staggered along the street, and I just followed along. "Please don't do this. Please, you have to stop. Someone make them stop." What is going on? Was I wrong? Is he not the Messiah? Speak to me. God, speak to me. But there was only silence. We made our way up Golgotha, and they began to lay him down on the cross. They picked up the spikes. They drove them into his hands. I heard the sound of the hammer. No, not the nails. No, not the nails. My baby! Oh God, I don't want to be here. I can't do this. I can't watch this. But I couldn't leave him. They raised up the cross and dropped it into the hole. His body jerked. They had beaten him so badly I couldn't even recognize him. And there he hung, the Son of God, dying in our place. And yet I heard him say, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Forgive them? Forgive them? These mean, wicked men. I hate them. How could anyone forgive them? Look what they've done. I could hardly stand it. He was covered in his own blood. Everything was covered in his blood. Finally, he took his last breath. As was befitting, the sky grew dark, and the earth shook. I didn't understand. I was sure he was our deliverer. Lest you get discouraged and think the story ended there, though it was a dark couple of days, I'm sure you've heard what happened on the third. Death could not hold him. The grave could not keep him. He is risen indeed. I knew it was bad watching your son take a brutal beating that he did not deserve. But it wasn't until much later that I realized it was so much more than that. In that moment, he bore the sins of humanity. Every sin you've committed, every sin I've committed. The beating, the mocking. I mean, those were horrific. But even more was the weight of our sins on his shoulders. You know, the cross was not in vain. If there was any other way, he'd have taken it. The cross was the only way. And he chose to do it. He chose to stay even when they were mocking him. Come on, Jesus, King of the Jews. What, you saved everyone else? You can't save yourself? Oh, hail Jesus. Oh, hail Jesus, King of the Jews. What's that? Oh, isn't that cute? You can't come down? Oh, poor you. Guess you're going to have to stay up there a little while longer and suffer. King of the Jews, please. I mean, you guys know he could have just marched himself right off that cross and wiped them out, right? He chose to stay until it was finished. He chose love. He chose us. And now we have a choice. Well, friends, I hope you'll see the power of what he's done on the cross and give him your life tonight.